y'all, it's about to get stupid. I'm just going to warn you now. It's about to get stupid. When I tell you selective knowledge abounds with the Ramseys, I mean that. It's about to get dumb. Patsy's trying to make it seem like, first of all, she's a terrible mother. Second of all, she's broke. She's asking us for money. Susan is jumping up and saying, leave and never come back. I'm here to talk to Patsy to be respectful and say, can I publish these pictures or not? It's just simple mother-daughter pics. I'm asking, can I sell them? Man, one thing about Judith Phillips is she don't mind spilling no tea. You don't mind talking. We talked a little bit about on another episode how Judith Phillips, John got himself in a little bit of hot water with some of this affair talk. And we watched a video where there was this blonde lady that apparently kept calling the office for John. John said he didn't know who she was. When we get into the police interviews, all of a sudden, John knows somebody who's blind, and he knows him very well, but he says he doesn't know him. And I say all that to say that, you know, that was John's business. But when they asked about Patsy's business, he was like, well, John might be doing all this stuff. What about Patsy? And Judith was like, I don't know. Patsy might have met somebody at High Peaks. I don't know. And obviously, when you're in that situation, you don't want to hear that. But I just thought it was funny that Judith seems to be this kind of person that, well, I ain't scared to spill no tea. So just got a couple of things about Judith and just kind of seeing the differing perspectives. So I don't expect this to be too long. Just kind of seeing the differing perspectives from Judith's side, kind of. And then like how the Ramseys kind of saw her through this process, and how when we see the friendships begin to sort of devolve, how that happens, where it comes from. Does it just, boom, we're no longer friends? Or is there like a natural progression that we can see? Somebody argued, it went left, what happened? So we remember Judith Phillips first from, if you've been following what I've been doing, we remember Judith Phillips kind of from this article, this Vanity Fair article by Anne Louise Bardock, written in 97, entitled Missing Innocence. And I have to say, we mentioned on another video that John and Patsy met this individual named Susan Bennett. And Susan Bennett was, and still has a website up called Jameson245.com, and essentially Ramsey apologist. And John didn't have any problem mentioning, that he appreciated this Sue Bennett person. But John and Patsy can also mention when they don't like someone or somebody or something. And the thing about it is, John sees everything. John might play like he don't see nothing. But John sees everything. You trust me. John sees everything. And when I tell you he's seen this article, because, and I bring up Jameson to say that when he was talking about Jameson, she was like, oh, she's got accurate reporting. She's generally correct. And then all of a sudden, as we talked about in another video, all of a sudden in the interviews, she's bothering us. We had to change our number to get away from her. My God. And that was a Ramsey apologist. That's somebody that was on your side. All right. That's somebody who likes you, who's vigorously defending you, that all of a sudden, this person is weird, and not saying, they didn't say she was weird, but all of a sudden, this person, she's calling me up on the phone with this lawyer, and, we no longer want to talk to her. We're changing our number. It's just kind of like cold turkey. But if he saw somebody found it, Susan Stein found it. But if he was able somehow, some way, if John was able to find Jameson or Sue Barnett, he definitely found this Vanity Fair article. And this Vanity Fair article stuck because Anne did a great job. And you know, when somebody does a great job, they're going to have you talking. Or when they say something that sticks, it's going to have you talking. Now, I'm not saying everything is going to be true every time somebody says something. Sometimes it might just get a rise out of you, just because it's so false. But in particular, John's seen this article, and I'll leave it at that. That's for another time, another place. But he's seen this article and he mentioned it. This article was written in 1997, right? John released his book in 2012. Like 15 years later, 15 years after this was written, John never forgot. He never forgot. He mentioned specific passages from this. Anyways, Judith Phillips. So I say all that to say that Anne Louise Bardock did a great job on this piece. And so we start from here when we're talking about Judith Phillips. So by the mid 80s, John Ramsay, working with his father-in-law, was doing well enough to move into a sprawling colonial house in Dunwoody. Patsy saw to it that both of Ramsay's daughters from his first marriage were given coming out parties. Here's where we get Judith. Judith Phillips, a buoyant, attractive photographer, first met Patsy in 1984 when Patsy was working with Phillips's husband. Okay, I'm sorry. Phillips's husband, not her husband, her husband's modem development company. In order to be friends with Patsy, you have to accept her family because they're such a big part of her life, especially her mother, says Phillips. Sometimes Nidra was obnoxious and said things that were so out of line and shocking, but the woman is unbelievable in her loyalty toward her daughters. Patsy and Judith Phillips, raising children roughly the same age, were drawn to each other, although there were differences. Patsy was very pro-life, says Phillips. I was a feminist. Patsy was involved in Atlanta's Junior League and a ladies' who charity called Lunch charity called Society. And up until the birth of her son, Burke, she worked. Phillips says Patsy had very expensive taste. She had 18th century artwork and exquisite antiques. That was Patsy. She just loves art. And John has very expensive and classic taste when it comes to his clothes. He liked his toys. He has a boat named Miss America and a plane. In 89, Ramsay merged his company with Boulder based Access Graphics and another firm. He seized control of the new company and in 1991 relocated his family to Boulder. Among his new hires were his old friends Jeff Merrick and Jim Marino. Ramsay then hit the jackpot, selling Access to Lockheed Martin and continuing to run it as president and CEO. Judith Phillips, who had moved to Boulder 3 years earlier, wondered if Patsy would have a hard time making the transition from the antebellum capital of the South to a small town full of hippies, Buddhists, and mountain climbers. However, Patsy, now the mother of the four-year-old Burke and newborn JonBenet, assured her that she was ready to have a different life. Don Paul adapted easily and moved into a company condo on Pearl Street. Nidra Paul, however, made no bones about her feelings concerning Boulder, referring to it as that hellhole. Okay, gonna skip around just a little bit. In the summer of 1993, Patsy was diagnosed with metastasized ovarian cancer. It was stage 4. It was clear up underneath the rib cage, says Pam Paul. Patsy began commuting to the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland for chemotherapy, and she took Taxol. And she mentions that in The Death of Innocence. Patsy mentions this in The Death of Innocence, which was released in 2000. But, and she mentioned that, but, here, Anne Louise Bardock is already reporting this in 1997. And so it just tells you Anne Louise's ability to capture stuff. Some of this stuff that is being reported here came out in books later on. You know what I mean? So anyways, because Patsy talked about this, and there was actually, she mentioned there's a story where she had a friend who was with her she met a buddy at the NIH. and they, obviously both going through chemotherapy and stuff like that. And so Patsy was just like, oh, this is my friend. And, when she was up in Charlevoix or something like that, after, JonBenet was killed and stuff like that, several years later or what have you, they were up in Charlevoix, and I think Patsy got a call from, the lady's husband, and was like, hey, you need to get here quick. She may not make it much longer. And then, Patsy she said she was so busy strategizing with Lynn Wood about PR stuff and how to fake out the media that, she ended up missing, not getting there in time. To be fair, the person said, if you're gonna see her one more time, please come quickly. She only has a couple of weeks, and I think Patsy thought she had a couple of weeks, and I think the lady died within a few days, and so I mean you couldn't have known that. And so the person her husband called back and said, don't rush, take your time, stuff like that. So, and Patsy kind of goes, that was my buddy in chemo. So anyways, I took John aside and said, you really need to do everything that you can to help her, recalls Mike Lynn. He needed to be reminded, and he did take some time off and travel with her. Judith Phillips was distressed to learn that her very ill friend was flying back and forth across the country by herself, sick as a dog, vomiting. Where the heck was John? And so in 95, the cancer went into remission. And so we see here that Judith Phillips, is a supporter of the Ramseys, but somewhere along the line, things went left. And, in 98, Judith was, coming sideways at the Ramseys about, hey, y'all need to buckle up. Y'all need to help JonBenet, help find this killer of JonBenet. Stop ducking and dodging the police. And she was like, yo, I'll write to, and I think she was the last one, to write a letter to the governor. First, it was, I think, Steve Thomas, and then Fleet and Priscilla White followed suit. And I think after that, Judith went ahead and wrote hers, and she kind of talks about it in her letter. It took me a little bit of time to write this because, I've been thinking about it, but just everything came to me, and, I'm thinking about my daughter, and my daughter was really a friend of JonBenet, and, it took her 3 months to overcome this kind of deal. And so she was just kind of, distraught. So I think I'm going to go ahead and write this and put my stamp of approval on this campaign to really try to push this thing forward to something like the grand jury, or have independent investigators look at it. And I think at that point, that came at a point to where she was kind of done with the Ramseys in terms of, I think our friendship is pretty much done. I think this is coming at a time to where either right before or right after she had started doing interviews and just kind of letting her opinion be known. And if you ask her something, Judith is not going to say, yo, I'm not going into that. Judith is kind of like, I mean, you ask me about it, I might say so. Judith is that type of person to where I might not say it outright because I don't want to be that messy, but I might indulge it a little bit. If you ask me, hey, who do you think ate all the cookies in the cookie jar? I know there's like 2 people who could have done it. Who do you think did it? And Judith might respond, well, there's only one person in that house who likes cookies. I'll leave it at that. And she won't ever just say who it is or say who she thinks it is, but she'll kind of put you on the hook and lead you on from that perspective, because and that tells you a little bit about her personality. She's funny like that. So anyways, but she can show a lot of care. I'm not trying to be a Judith Phillips apologist in any way. I'm just what it seems like to me. This is where we move over to how she's portrayed in the Death of Innocence. So, and Patsy is, I want to show you, I wasn't going to read this, but I want to show you how random of a thought process this is. I want to show you how random of a thought process this is. Starting from the top of the page. around the middle of March, the district attorney hired a very experienced homicide detective to look at the police investigation for the DA's office. After interviewing many candidates, Alex Hunter called Lou Smith out of retirement from the El Paso County Sheriff's Department and pressed him into service on our case. Smith had earned a reputation in Colorado Springs as a methodical, ethical, and very effective detective who had solved 90% of some 200 homicides he investigated during his 30-year career. He was best known for tracking down a killer of Heather Dawn Church, a little girl who had been murdered near Colorado Springs. The case lay dormant for 4 years until Lou began investigating it. With meticulous attention to detail, he identified the killer and ultimately arrested him in Florida. As John Douglas would say about Smith after meeting him, "I would hate to have that guy on my tail if I was a bad guy." In addition to Smith, District Attorney Alex Hunter asked Boulder County Sheriff George Epp to loan Detective Steve Ainsworth to the DA's office so Hunter could make him part of the new investigative team. At least the district attorney was doing something the police had refused to do, accept help from people with proven experience. Stop lying. Stop lying. It seemed unusual for the DA to hire his own detectives. John and I were convinced that he was beginning to see the problems with the BPD's investigation. The reputation of Smith. And look, I read this because I need them to say it in their own words. But when you read this stuff, it's like a smear campaign. That's what it is. It's like a smear campaign for no reason. Anyways. It seemed unusual for the DA to hire his team, blah, 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 blah. The reputation of Smith and Ainsworth gave us hope that something significant, some significant progress might happen in the future. At the very least, they would bring an objective viewpoint to the investigation. We were delighted that so much experience was being brought to bear on our daughter's behalf. We're talking about the DA. Right? Out of nowhere. During the month of March, I became painfully aware of a new angle being played out at John's and my expense for personal profit. I couldn't believe the lengths to which people would go to make a few dollars. The Judas syndrome, I've heard it called. That's how you know Patsy is saying this. Okay, where are you taking me, Patsy? Out of the clear blue, a former acquaintance of mine started trying to visit me at the Steins for a little conversation. Because of my past experience with Judith Phillips's attempts to launch a career as a photographer, I was wary of what might be going on. Judith showed up at the Steins' doorstep 3 months after JonBenet's death, obviously wanting something, but I wasn't sure what. So Judith is coming, 3 months later. Aren't we all friends? It's only 3 months later. What happened? All of a sudden, her attempts to launch a career as a photographer. You all remember when John was talking about Linda Arndt? And after a while, he wouldn't even mention her name anymore. That so-called, she went from a detective to a police officer to like a common police officer down to a person who shall remain nameless. And so now what they do when people make them really mad, they don't even mention them. They don't even give them their title. They just be like, "Oh, you are a so-called photographer. You're a so-called detective." That person, some lady who calls herself a policeman, some lady who calls herself a detective, some lady said this about me. Wouldn't even give her that respect. That's crazy. Because of because they be trying to act unbothered. But you can see they bothered. Because of my past experiences, I knew she was up to something. Whoa, hold on. You didn't have no problem having her take pictures of you and JonBenet. Back in the day when JonBenet was in her heyday, it wasn't no problems then. All of a sudden we see some issues. Okay. She obviously wanted something, but I don't know what. While Judith chose to bill herself as one of my closest friends on tabloid television, I had actually been a business colleague of her husband's when we all lived in Atlanta. Mel Phillips had written a software program, and I co-authored the user's manual that went with his product while we both worked for Hayes Microcomputer Products, Inc. During this time, I had met his wife, Judy. In those days, she was known as Judy. But by the time John and I moved to Boulder, where they now also lived, she had become Judith. Why do we need to make that distinction? Do you still call her Judy? I mean, Judith Phillips ain't walking around here being like in those days. I used to call her Patsy. Now she's known as Patricia. Why are we making a distinction here? Who's making the distinction? Is it because Judith is saying, I would like to be called Judith for business? I've heard that before. Or is it Patsy being like, we not on a nickname basis no more? I only call my friends nicknames. I only shorten my friends' names. So that's what you get. You don't get a short name anymore. Huh? Judith? Go kick rocks. You're no good for the name Judy. I think I'll call you Judith. So petty. Like, is Judy that important to you that you have to strip her of the name? Like, you think you're embarrassing her because you strip her of the name Judy? Anyways, so when we arrived in Colorado, they were one of the few families we knew, and we went to dinner with them several times. But since our children were different ages and went to different schools, we actually didn't have a lot in common with them. But since our children were different ages and went to different schools, Patsy and Judith Phillips, raising children roughly the same age, were drawn to each other. So now we making distinctions on age. My kids ain't the same age as yours, so I don't see what we have in common. We don't even go to the same school. Our kids don't even go to the same school. What could I? What do we need to hang out for? You can get up out my face. So while Judith is like, oh yeah, I knew him, and he's kind of pulling him close, Patsy is like, I mean, we really weren't that close. Honestly, she begged me to take pictures of me and JonBenet and my mom and Burke. She begged us. I don't really know it like that. Real quickly, you see how you can fall out of the grace within 3 months. Real quickly, you see how you can fall out of the graces with Patsy. I took pictures of you and you didn't have a problem. It's always somebody forced me. They made me do it. You remember, this would say birds of a feather flock together. John and Patsy. You remember when John was like, when they asked John about his affair, and John was like, well, we hired her, and then I was in a vulnerable place. She wanted to get something from upstairs, and, she asked me for my key, and I went up there and I unlocked the door for her. And then all of a sudden she just turned around and kissed me. And then from there, she just yanked me inside, and I could do nothing about it. All of a sudden, we're inside it. All of a sudden, I find myself back at her place. I find myself going inside. We're turning the lights off, and my clothes are coming off. I don't know how that's happening. I really can't remember. All I remember is I was in a very vulnerable state. John and Patsy have a way of offloading responsibility and externalizing responsibility that is hilarious to me. So when we come here, Patsy's like, oh, I don't even know this person. Dang, near never seen him in my life. So basically, but since our children were different ages and went to different schools, we actually didn't have a lot in common with them. Judith's thing was photography, a hobby she intensely pursued. Come on, don't do that. You know, I'm serious about photography. You know, I'm asking you, will you take a photo shoot? And so her thing was photography, a hobby she intensely pursued. I had urged her to take a couple of classes when I first moved to Boulder, and I encouraged her to enter work. Her work in the 4-H fair in Longmont. Oh, so you're taking responsibility. I mean, y'all ain't friends and y'all don't have anything in common. One of the things that they might have had in common was the art form of taking pictures and painting pictures. So I don't know why Patsy's trying to cap. You know what I mean? Like, why are you acting like y'all have absolutely nothing in common? You both appreciate, visual art. Judith takes the art and you paint. So that would be the commonality that you guys would talk about. But now we see Patsy sort of trying to mother Judith in a way and take responsibility and say, her thing was this. And so I urged her to take a couple of classes when we first moved to Boulder, as if Judith needed you to urge her to take some classes. But it almost seems, knowing Patsy, that almost seems like some shade to say her photography wasn't very good. It's a hobby that you intensely pursue, but you ain't good at, is essentially what Patsy seems to be indicating here. You ain't good at it. And my way of telling you that you ain't good at this to your face is that, baby girl, maybe you need to take some classes. Maybe you need to take some classes. I'm sorry. You need to take some classes. And then once you take some classes, you should enter your work in Longmont. She enrolled in the classes, and the next thing I knew, she was advertising herself as a professional, always trying to put together a photography show. Her thing, wait, where is it? I think that's several times now. Judith, out of the clear blue, which had nothing to do with the DA, completely turned out of nowhere because you're mad and you just want to talk about Judith. I mean, that's really what we're leading up to. I'm mad and I just want to talk about Judith, and I don't care where I talk about Judith. Y'all gonna hear about Judith. Little conversation. She wants to have a little conversation with me. Judith's thing. And she was always trying to put together a photography show. Why you got to keep doing that? This is how Patsy and John do. And you see them do it in interviews. You see them do it in written interviews or transcript interviews. And you see them do it in videotaped interviews a lot. They always basically talk about, when they talk about people, they kind of do the quotes, the air quotes a little bit, and not necessarily this to your face, but they always say this person's thing, whatever she was doing. And it's always like, I don't even want to call it like a backhanded compliment, because no one with these guys ever gets any credit for doing anything important. This so-called female officer. On one hand, I get it, because you're saying, these people offended me. These people hurt me deeply when I was in pain the most. They hurt me deeply. So I get it. But on another point, I just don't understand why people can't get credit. You know what I mean? People can't get credit for what they're legitimately doing. You may not like that. That's just like me talking to somebody, and I might be talking about, say, a friend, and I'm talking about this friend, and I'm saying, well, this so-called friend of mine, and that's okay. This so-called friend of mine, he put me on blast, and supposed to be my friend, but that didn't pan out, and that's done. And somebody says, well, how'd you guys meet each other? Well, we met in the PhD program, and we start hanging out, and you know, his wife and my wife, and this and that and the third. And I go the next step and say, well, this friend we met in the PhD program where he was supposed to be studying labor, and it's just like, you can acknowledge that somebody is studying labor. You know what I mean? Well, he was studying labor in the PhD program, and his wife and my wife and we got together, and this and that and the third, and blah blah blah, and everything, so on and so forth, but it just didn't work out, or we took a little break, or what. You can acknowledge though that this person operated in this capacity. You don't have to basically tear them down in every single way. You might say, well, Judith tore them down. True. I can't argue with it. Depending. Maybe Judith just wouldn't be quiet, I guess is what it is. So Judith takes these classes that you ask her to take. If you thought, and she comes out and she's trying to put together a photography show, she gets shade for doing that. I have yet to hear anything bad that Judith has said about the Ramseys other than, or something that she hasn't called them names. All she got upset about was them not cooperating with the police. That's it. I haven't heard her calling people names. I saw her in one interview and they were talking about John, and she said, I mean, he's very quiet. That's what everybody says. And so basically you tell her, take some classes and enter your work in this fair. She comes out and she essentially does what you tell her to do, but she doesn't get any credit for it. You're still minimizing everything that she's doing. Judith began traveling all over Colorado, leaving her family for days at a time to shoot. More shade. And this is kind of like, if we're looking for what I might call Hal Haddon's strategy as a lawyer, this is a very layman's kind of example of what Hal Haddon might try to attempt to do with witnesses who may not want to give their story to the Ramsey defense team. And that's called impeaching the witness. So basically, as Patsy is saying, this individual is supposed to be, and that's questioning the credibility of the witness. This individual is supposed to be doing photography, and she's supposed to be a good mom, but she's leaving her family for days at a time to focus on her passion as a photographer. We don't have any, and this is, if you would use stronger language, you might be stepping into some legal territory, because you're questioning this woman's ability to be a mother. How do you know what I'm doing all over Colorado? You know what I mean? Like, you don't know if I talk to my husband and my kids are good, they're straight. Maybe I'm going to shoot all over Colorado and my husband says, I got it. I want you to do your thing. I want you to go take pictures. I want you to build this. You've taken classes for this. I see you all the time taking pictures of our kids. I see you asking people for shoots. I think your work is good enough that you should go all over Colorado and try to, really, really go for it. Man, I can't remember this lady's name, but she had a master class on how to take good photographs, and she was a big name in the industry. And I can't remember if she was a photographer for Rolling Stone or Vanity Fair or whatever she was, but she was big in the industry. And no doubt, if we think about Judith Phillips may have wanted to be something like that. A famous photographer one day. And so being sometimes when you're working to be something, then you got to sacrifice some things, right? You can't do everything. And for Patsy to try to question, this lady's ability to be a mom, but then turn around and get mad when people question her about her ability to be a mom to JonBenet, it's kind of hypocritical a little bit, but both John and Patsy. You guys are writing this book together. It's a little bit hypocritical for you to criticize or try to undermine her credibility as a mom, and then be like, how could you guys ever think that I would da 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 to my kid? Well, why do you think she's abandoning? Why are you trying to insinuate that she's abandoning her children? And kind of going back to my point about Hal Haddon's strategy, Hal Haddon would probably try to start with something very basic like this and say, well, you're a mom, right? You have kids. Who's taking care of your kids when you're going out and doing your photography? Because sometimes, and she might say, well, you know, the father takes care of my husband takes care of the kids. And, you know, when I get back, you know, I take care of them. And then Hal Haddon might push and say, well, yeah, but you're gone for days at a time sometimes. Like, how often are you gone for days at a time? And she would now, if she's in front of jurors or whoever, now you might say, okay, this woman might not be fit. You might be starting to say, and now she has to be now she's on the defensive. It's like, wait a minute. What did I do wrong? I didn't kill anybody. Yeah, you didn't kill anybody, but you might say something that we don't like against the Ramseys. And so if we were to go to trial, I have to impeach you as a witness. And I start with something like this and say, oh, you may not have been a good mother. First planting doubt in the mind of the jury, right? You may not be a good mother. But then I may find some other things like, oh, you know, you once said this about this person. You once said this about this person. But over here, you call this person your friend. But over here, you call this person this. Like stuff that's meaningless. You know what I mean? But now, and that doesn't affect whether this person has information about certain things or whether or not they witnessed certain things about a crime. But now, just because you think or you've painted in the minds of the jury that this person is not a good mother or what have you, then all of a sudden we are bordering on impeaching the witness. And so that's kind of where we're going here, but more in a criminal or a criminal trial sense. But this is kind of like a civil trial sense, right? Because Patsy is kind of putting Judith Phillips out in front of the public of the court of public opinion. And she's saying, look at this woman who travels all over Colorado. Who are you going to trust? Me, a loving mom who stays home with her kids and is encouraging to her and turns her back for 1 second and is attacked by this supposed friend of mine who is a Judas? She's already framed it up top. This person is a Judas. Are you going to believe her, or are you going to believe me? Because I'm at home with my kids. I'm watching my remaining child, Burke, every day. But she is traveling all over, leaving her family to go pursue this passion when it's really a hobby. She's not even, guys, when I met her, she wasn't even good at it. She wasn't even worth anything. I told the girl, go take some classes and then enter your stuff. I was just trying to be nice. I knew she wasn't going to make it. That's crazy. And you know what? That's a little bit of Nidra right there. That's a little bit of Nidra. Now we know Nidra was kind of the strict. In my opinion, she was kind of a stricter. I won't say crazy disciplinarian, but I feel like she was a little bit stricter. Headmistress in the prime of Gene Brody. Patsy was a little bit more fun and joyful and stuff like that and spontaneous. But I've been around my mama my entire life, and so a little bit of Nidra is going to come out. A little bit of obnoxiousness is going to come out. Right? So I always saying a little bit of Patsy when Patsy just plain gets tired of people. You know what I mean? When you cross Patsy. And again, birds of a feather flock together, because John speaks about people in the same way. They don't attack people directly. They attack them indirectly. On occasion, when my mother was in town, Judith begged to photograph us for a mother and daughter series she was putting together. She also took pictures of JonBenet and me, which gave her 2 generations of mothers and daughters. She had approached John about getting Access Graphics to sponsor this show as she sent it on a self-initiated tour of Colorado. His company declined. Our pictures didn't make the cut for the traveling mother-daughter show photo show Judith took throughout the state. This is normal. This is normal for people to ask for sponsorships. There's nothing wrong with that. That's normal. Patsy's trying to make it seem like, first of all, she's a terrible mother. Second of all, she's broke. She's asking us for money. That's normal. These are reasonable things to do. So John declined. Our pictures didn't make the cut. During my struggle with cancer, and losing my hair, Judith frequently asked to take my picture. I had tried to tell her that I was in a fight for my life, and having my bald head snapped by her camera wasn't high on my list of priorities. However, Judith persisted. So shortly after I finished my chemotherapy, I acquiesced to doing a few pictures in the spring of 1994. By this time, I had about a quarter inch of hair and wasn't as sensitive about my baldness. Saying yes to the brief photography session was easier than constantly fending off her persistent inquiries. Again, going back to the same idea of John saying, man, I really ain't want that girl. I really ain't want Gloria Williams. She came on to me. I was vulnerable. And you know what? I just wanted to unlock the door and leave. But she pulled me in. So I had to go. Patsy's in a little bit more of a vulnerable situation. I will give you that. But Patsy, you could have just said, hey, babe, I'm not really there. You know, I'm not really with the whole, taking picture of cancer patients thing. And the conversation probably went something along the lines of, I think this would be empowering, because Judith Phillips is a feminist. And so she's all about, in a sense, she's all about women empowerment is what she will tell you at the very base foundation. I'm all about women empowerment. Women are strong. Women are bold. Women are brave. Women can do anything. So that's probably why she was asking to take the pictures of Patsy in that state. And she was probably asking to take the pictures before Patsy started getting her hair back, because what she would have liked to, and she was kind of ahead of her time, I think, what she would have liked to have done was put the picture maybe in all black, and just maybe a picture of Patsy like facing the camera, Patsy facing the camera, maybe her hand on her neck or something like that, and just kind of looking straight and with expressionless, but something that is an expression that's very convincing. And she would have put something below, like a caption below, like, I am fearless in the face of anything. And it would have been a very empowering, very inspirational picture, I think. And so if she would have taken that to an art show, or a photography show, that would have empowered a lot of people, right? I think that's what it is. But Patsy, and you know what? Patsy's acting like she didn't understand, but I think she's acting like that in retrospect, because I think what Patsy actually means to say is, I didn't feel comfortable with it. What it could have felt like in the moment was, I didn't feel comfortable with it because my hair thing. I don't mind taking pictures, but it's just my hair. That's it. If I had hair, or if I was feeling at my best, then yeah. Women don't want to be photographed when they're not at their best. They really don't. They don't want to be photographed at the wrong angle. So that was probably part of Patsy's concern. I'm not at my best. So we'll just leave it there. And I think at the time, Patsy understood Judith as saying, look, we have an opportunity here to capture you when you feel like you're not at your best. However, we can show the world that even though you're not at your best, you are your best. And so to say that in any way, shape, or form, you will always be your best. We will always love you for who you are. You will always be you. And that's all I think that Judith was trying to say. But Patsy's trying to paint it as, this girl was hounding me. This amateur photographer was hounding me. She doesn't really know how to be a photographer, and she's trying to take herself serious and blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, it's a little shady. So John doesn't do whatever. I finally get my my hair. Patsy's like, I finally get my hair back, and I agree to take the picture because this girl has hounded me. She persists. Several years passed, and then JonBenet's death became national news. Now Judith came to see me at the Stein's house asking for permission to publish the mother-daughter pictures that had previously been excluded from her show. I mean, the girl came and asked. You know what I mean? She's coming to ask because she could have just published them. Y'all, it's about to get stupid. I'm just going to warn you now. It's about to get stupid. When I tell you selective knowledge abounds with the Ramseys, I mean that. It's about to get dumb. Really dumb. Fortunately, Susan Stein had heard earlier that she was trying to sell some of the photographs to People magazine. How did Susan hear that? How did Susan hear that? From who? Now you're making me question what Susan Stein is doing behind the scenes. How did you hear that? It's not like People magazine is just popping up. Maybe they are. And being like, hey, man, if they did, you didn't mention it. And it's not like People magazine pops up and be like, hey, can you give us some pictures? Because Judith is there trying to sell some. Maybe she's trying to shop them around. But from what I can see here, People magazine didn't pop up at Susan Stein's house and be like, hey, we got somebody on the line trying to sell some pictures. Would you like to sell some pictures? So how did Susan Stein find this out? That's got me a little bit. Fortunately, Susan Stein man, bruh. When we talk about somebody being caught up on the latest gossip and celebrity news, that's going to be Susan Stein. Nosy. Susan told Judith in no uncertain terms to leave and not come back. What? You can't even tell me nothing. Be honest with you. You weren't even a real friend until now. If we just keeping it 100, you weren't even in the inner circle. What can you tell me? You're on the outside looking in just like me, quite honestly. If I was Judith, that's what I would have said. Man, girl, get out of my face. Let me talk to Patsy. I need to talk to Patsy real quick. Because Susan is jumping up and saying, leave and never come back. I'm here to talk to Patsy to be respectful and say, can I publish these pictures or not? It's just simple mother-daughter pics. I'm asking, can I sell them? Now, doesn't that make sense? She's a photographer. Isn't the point of a photographer's job to sell pictures? And have her pictures in People magazine? Isn't that the point? Might have to go get pizza. Isn't that the point? You don't even want me to do my job now. I can't even do my job. This is unreasonable. But that's not even what I'm talking about. That's not even what I'm talking about. When I say it was about to get stupid, that's not even what I'm talking about. Susan said, leave and don't come back in no uncertain terms. All right, cool. I won't come back. Back in January, when Judith told our friends she wanted to sell the photos, our liable attorney had sent a standard letter to her telling her not to publish, sell, or distribute any photographs of the Ramsey family without her permission. Oh, but old Judith, the dumb one, the one who's not a good mother, the one who's doing this as a hobby, one step ahead. Yet a few months later, Judith got that letter and was like, bet. Yet a few months later, Judith apparently sold the pictures to the National Enquirer. She always had her subjects sign an agreement saying that she could do whatever she wanted with the photographs, and I had apparently signed such a document years earlier, never dreaming she would do anything further with the photos, let alone sell them to a supermarket tabloid. Baby girl, I tried to sell them to People magazine, but you wouldn't let me. You had a problem with it. But you know what? She probably sold them to the National Enquirer because the National Enquirer was paying more money for them. That's why she probably did it. And she came to talk to you about it when she said, hey, People magazine has reached out for some pictures. Some innocent pictures. These are innocent pictures. These are meaningless. Just of you and your mom, you and JonBenet. These are meaningless pictures. Like, I mean, it's not breaking news. Oh my God. Did you see the latest JonBenet pictures with JonBenet and her grandmother? Okay. What are we talking about? That doesn't impress me. It's just a picture of a girl and her grandmother. We saw it. You can't analyze that. We saw it. It's done. Why are you mad that I sold that? I'm a photographer. That's what I'm supposed to do. And then this is the dumb part right here. They tried to get a liable attorney on her to shut her down. Baby girl. And then later to find out she always gets her subjects that Judith was one step ahead of her. Sign an agreement to probably learn that from that old photography school you told me to go. You told me to go take some classes. I learned it. I did what you told me to do. But now you're mad at me because I learned how to be a photographer. Because sometimes when you try to shade people, they actually are out doing things legitimately that you don't give them credit or respect for. And when they pop up on you like, I'm just going to get you to sign this. It's pretty standard. I'm just going to get you to sign this. But the unreasonable, naive response. She had to sign an agreement, and I apparently signed a document years earlier, never dreaming she would use this. It don't freaking matter where she's going to use it. She said, sign it away. That's why you need to read the contract. She said, if you sign this to me, I can use it for whatever I want. You need to think about that in all contexts. That means that you didn't do your work. You were lazy. You didn't think about it thoroughly. And the girl said, well, if you're going to try to get an attorney on me, I try to come and talk to you. But if you're going to get an attorney on me, highest bidder. Take that. And you mad at me. Never dreaming that she would betray me and sell it to a supermarket tabloid. What do you think she's going to do with that, Patsy? Like, this is the thing that John and Patsy do. Like, I never thought that my friends would turn around and betray me. They just asked you to talk to the cops. What are you talking about? I never once thought that this person would go and talk to the news. What did they say that was so wrong? Nothing. This touchiness. John and Patsy being touchy because you saying stuff that is not approved by me, because it's a problem for Fleet White and Priscilla White to go to the media. It's a problem for Judith Phillips to go to the media, but yet Pam Griffin can go on national television. You can have one of your friends call up on television, on the Lisa Gibbons show and the Geraldo Rivera show. And then you can have your sister call up trying to blast people. Why you ain't telling them to stay off television? I'm confused. That makes sense. What's the parameters in which all of a sudden y'all are friends, but what's the parameters in which people can go on television? I think this was the end of that. I think. Yeah, they were talking about tricking people on the plane is what they were talking about, essentially. Yeah. While John traveled back and forth to Boulder, Burke and I stayed in Atlanta. Burke had always been a good student and quickly adjusted to life in his new school. I knew he would do well and that the fifth grade would be a challenging but significant learning experience. And I knew he was glad to be back in Atlanta, to close to my parents and close to some of his old buddies. Um, on October 8th, I discovered that Judith Phillips had finally made her big sale. The National Enquirer was running photos she had taken of JonBenet and me. Despite our attorney's warning not to sell them, her persistent efforts to profit from the old pictures finally paid off at the cash register. Shortly after the tabloid hit the streets, Judith showed up on the television program Hard Copy, describing our past friendship and expressing dismay about why I had dropped her as an old friend. However, I was pleased that she described my personal relationship with JonBenet as loving. Oh my God. So she ain't your friend. You shouldn't respect anything that she says. Period. You should respect nothing that she says. We not friends. I don't care what you say about me. But if you say something good, if you say something good, I'm there with you. But I still don't like you. Don't talk to me. Despite, this is so dumb. Despite our attorney telling her and warning her, you better not sell those pictures, she did it anyway. Do you not understand what a contract means? I don't care how many times or how many letters you send to me to tell me not to do it. If we have a contract, I can publish these pictures. What are you talking about? Stop. Why would you even put that in here? Despite our attorney's warnings not to sell them, your attorney shouldn't be. This is the type of stupid stuff that Lynn would probably do. This is the stuff I'm talking about. This is the type of stuff that Lynn would do. Send out letters knowing it's a waste of paper. She has a contract to say that I can do what I want. Why would you even draft that letter? Why? That doesn't make sense. That's a waste of time, and that is blowing smoke. That's gaslighting. You are blowing smoke, and you know that letter don't hold no weight. Why would you send that out? To try to threaten and intimidate people into doing something when you know you have no power. Another Haddon strategy. I'm trying to they would send attorney letters to these witnesses that did not have to talk to them. And they would be like, hey, it's not fair for you to not talk to us and tell us what you're going to say to the cops. You should be fair and tell us what you're going to say. That's that stuff that Lynn would be doing in interviews. Oh, no, let me see it. You can't ask us about this and not show us. You can't do this. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. What are you talking about? You can't ask us about this if you're not going to show us. Yes, I can. What are you talking about? And that's that stuff they get on television doing. That's that stuff they get on television talking about. And if people don't know any better, they believe them. And they were like, oh, yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. You would want to be fair. But Lynn Wood ain't fair. Lynn Wood, I don't know if you guys watched the Web Sleuths live on Chris Wolf. And I think I got like partly through it. I need to go and watch the rest of it, but I got super busy. But in the part where they brought Chris Wolf up and they kind of, he was sitting on the side, man, I need to go watch it again. I need to go back and watch it. Because I want to hear what Cotton Star had to say. Man, he made somebody mad in some sort of forum, and it was hilarious. Whatever. But just in forums, people get touchy and stuff like that. But anyways, it was like an old forum or something like that. He had posted a picture in there talking about it, and people were like, what's this picture for? And so I'm like, just trying to give you information. What are you talking? Just trying to give you information. My God, it's a crime to share information. Okay. And so anyways, So what they were talking about on the live, sorry for getting distracted. What they were talking about on the live was that, when you get into interviews and Lynn Wood is objecting to everything. I object. I object. I object. I object. No. What's the question? Reframe your question. He was doing all that so that when it would go on the record, he's doing that to wear you down. So when whatever he says goes on the record and you don't push back, when it gets taken to court and somebody tries to use that and the judge only sees what's in the deposition record and says, dang, based off of this, I can't say anything because Lynn Wood is the only one speaking and there's no rebuttal. And so based off of that alone, that's all I have to go with. Darnay Hoffman did a good job, but he just didn't provide a rebuttal in some situations. And that is their job, to throw stuff like this out, whether it's legitimate or not. Lynn Wood's words in that deposition, according to the judge, were it's not based on whether there was truthfulness in his words. It's simply based on the fact that there was no rebuttal to counter him. And if you allow these people to continue to, if Judith Phillips would have lost that disclosure agreement or whatever she did, it's not come to my mind. Help me out in the comments right now. Like a photo release or something like that they do. They do it with streamers and stuff like that. TikTok does it and Instagram, they all do it. Live streaming apps do it. And they basically say, you allow us to use your pictures freely and da-da-da. You license your pictures to us and anything that you do on this platform and blah, blah, blah. And your name and likeness and image and da-da-da. Judith Phillips standard. And that's, when I mean standard, that's standard. So you have to think hard and clear about whether or not I want my image represented by these people, because you think, yeah, they could do something. And so you sending your attorney to tell people, or your attorney sending letters to tell people what not to do. And then you're trying to put it in this book and say, she did that. She released it, even though our attorneys told her not to. We got the law involved, and people who are none the wiser would be like, oh, she got an attorney and you ignored their attorney's letters. You ignored the law. No, Patsy had no legal ground to stand on. That's it. But they will put this stuff in there and make it seem like they're correct, and they're not. Patsy is fully in the wrong here, period. Shortly after the tabloid hit the streets, Judith showed up on the television show, blah, 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 claiming to be my old friend. I ain't like that, but I like the fact that she said me and JonBenet had a loving relationship. That shows you Judith, her thing was never to be malicious. She's not trying to be malicious to you otherwise. Because that's kind of like Jim Marino. Y'all sent Jim Marino in to be investigated. And Jim was like, I don't even know why I got in it. But I think John is a good father, but that don't mean I gotta like why he put me in it. People who y'all throw in the mud still being nice to y'all. I'm not being malicious. I'm just trying to talk to you, Patsy. But your bulldog kept me out. Your bulldog wouldn't let me talk to you. Get away. You never come back here again, idiot. I'm just trying to talk to her and let her know what this deal is going to do. Maybe I could have sold these pictures and said, hey, I know you guys are having a hard time right now. I would like to bless you guys. I would like to sell these, make a little profit. I take 75%. I give you 25. How is that? Or we split it 50-50. She could have come with that. Or if you would have let her in the house to have a conversation, whatever she sold it to the tabloids for, maybe the tabloids paid $10,000 for it. Maybe she sells it for $10K and says, I said 50-50 per picture. I said $10K per picture. What I sell, 4 pictures, $40K. I'll give you guys 20. Boom. If you would have just let me talk to you, but you ain't want to talk to me. So now I know what kind of time we on. Oh, we on that type of time? Okay, cool. I'm not running anything else by you. Don't talk to me about it again. Friends of mine began seeing Judith on a number of other television talk shows describing her relationship to me. Apparently, she was on a talk for pay circuit and making all the stops. I mean, can you blame her? Can you blame her? It's pretty lucrative, ain't it? Cause y'all were never on a talk for pay circuit. Patsy and John were never on a talk for pay circuit. That's what you telling me. Y'all never went on TV for no money. Come on. Y'all never went on TV for no money. Come on. Apparently she was on a talk for pay, making all the stops. Larry King, CNN, Katie Couric, I think it was, Barbara Walters, who was it? No, I don't think that was something different. I can't think of it. It's coming to my mind right now. But those four. Later on, Oprah, Dan Abrams, Netflix, CrimeCon. The View, A&E. I think 48 hours I think 48 hours. I think they did a segment for 48 hours. And then Good Morning America. That's the one I was looking for. Good Morning America. Y'all not doing no talk for pay? Y'all not doing all the circuits? All right. We were pleased that she truthfully reported never seeing us hurt the children or being abusive in any way. Rather, Phillips described us as a loving, close-knit family. On one of these occasions, Judith said that she hated even to think that we might be guilty, but she couldn't understand our hesitation to talk about what happened. Evidently, she expected us to make the same talk show circuit discussing our daughter's death. This was not an entertainment issue in our minds. We were in the midst of a serious murder investigation and did not feel compelled to share our investigative tactics or our excruciating pain with the press and the public. I think that's it. Before I make a statement on anything else, I think that's it. What would be the best investigative? Well, let me ask this question. What would be an investigative tactic better than working with the police from the very beginning in the first 48 hours? I don't know of one. Allow trained detectives who actually have solved murders to do their job. I don't know of a better tactic. That's the best tactic from beginning. But then if you want to hire your detectives to be a supplement, fine. But what tactic would there be to not sitting down for 3 months and talking to the cops, but making the media? Because you didn't need Judith to tell you to make the talk show circuit. You didn't need Judith to tell you that at all. In fact, you had already been on the talk show circuit. You were already talking in the media and nobody knew why. That's what's confusing. You were already talking in the media and no one knew why. When you were supposed to be talking to the cops, you completely pump faked and went to the media and they were like, what? I thought you guys were coming back to talk to us. Nope. Going straight to CNN. Why? I think the Ramseys thought it was bigger than it really was. And it wasn't. They blew it out of proportion. Because to go to CNN in another state? Yo, what? To go to CNN in another state is crazy. That's crazy. Take it easy. Evidently, she expected us to make the same, because look, Again, Judith is not being like malicious. She's just saying, I don't think they're guilty. I just don't understand why they won't talk. That's all she was saying. And we see here that Patsy and John really don't have anything to rebut that with. They don't really have a rebuttal on that. You can't trash a person who's being nice to you. The girl came on. She didn't say anything crazy about you. She was just her intent the entire time was just to talk to you. We're friends. And that's what Judith is saying. I thought we were friends, but I show up and Susan Stein is like, no, you can't come in. I heard you were trying to sell pictures to the tabloid. Now, Patsy, you'll let a stranger walk up on you in Charlevoix and talk about, make it make sense. You'll let a stranger walk up on you in Charlevoix and talk about, hey, I'm a painter too. We should get drinks and talk about painting. Oh my God, I would love that. You would let somebody, and it's a tabloid reporter, you would let somebody walk in with a shirt and some flowers and say, oh, these are from Princess Diana. Oh, Princess Diana, please. Tabloid reporter. You guys are so gullible that you would let tabloid reporters, you guys are terrible judges of character. Terrible. You would let tabloid reporters in who mean you no good from the start. Instead of your own friend who's coming to you and saying, I got a deal on the table. I'm thinking about taking it and selling it. We can make some money off this thing. I can work with you guys. What do you think? No. Get out of here and never come back. I thought we were friends. Even after you shunned her, she had nothing bad to say. She just said, I don't know why they tripping on me right now. I think they should do the talk show circuit. I think they should explain themselves. I just don't know why they're not talking to the cops. I don't understand that. And she said that in her letter. I think, and she clearly refrained from doing it until Steve Thomas and Fleet and Priscilla White did it. Because at first she was probably like, man, I really rock with them. I really don't want to do this. However, man, I think they should be talking. She's not malicious. She's just like, what's the hide? Just talk to them. And y'all know, and just like, but that's kind of like, what we talked about with Fleet White. You can't say anything to Fleet White. Because John knows he can't say anything, because when you ask John about Fleet White, John is just like, oh, I don't know why he started tripping on me. Cops pulled him aside and got a hold to him. Just start tripping on me. You can't say nothing about Judith either. Really, you don't really have a legitimate claim against her, other than the fact that, she said that she did this and I didn't like it. Okay, she had a contract for that. She tried to come talk to you about that. You shunned her. You told her to get out the yard. And she came being honest, telling you what she was going to do, and you just kicked her out. Told her to get away. And then you were surprised and tried to send her some freaking legal letters, cease and desist, I guess, to get her to stop. No, I don't have to. I have a contract. She's not dumb. She probably took it to her own lawyer and was like, what's the validity of this? Is it legitimate? Can they legitimately stop me? No. Release the pictures. And you see, y'all didn't go after her, did y'all? Because you can't. She didn't do anything wrong. That's what I'm saying. You guys are telling a radically different story about this woman. And Judith is like, I rock for him. When I saw my homie sick, I didn't understand why John wasn't flying with her. That's my friend. Judith is telling you, I care about this woman for real, for real. She's sick, and I don't understand why her husband is not going with her. That's crazy. He should be traveling with her. He should be taking care of her. Went on the talk show circuit. Never said anything bad. Hey, look, I think they love their kids. I've seen them be nothing but loving to their kids. And John is ready to go, amped up. Oh, she's not gonna say nothing. You can relax. Take it easy, Tiger. Nobody's going to talk about you. I'm just saying. I don't understand why you're doing this. But anyways, that's the video. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, drop a comment. Thank you for everyone who supports. For real. And when I mean support, monetarily, like, share, subscribe, dropping comments in the chat, and all such as that. All of it is support. I appreciate it all. For those of you who have joined the community, thank you so much. And what I'm trying to figure out what to do. So if it's desolate, I'm trying to figure out what to do. So, but thank you so much to everyone for being here, for engaging. Take care of yourself, as I always say. Continue to look out for yourself. I appreciate you for being here. Until next time, take care.